Well, good morning, members and officers, and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. We'll move straight to item 1. Apologies for absence. I can't see any absentees from the committee. All here. Notification of substitutes. There are none since all the committee are present. We now move to item 2, disclosable pecuniary interest. Members are reminded that they must declare their disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable or non-registrable interest in any matter being considered at the meeting, as set out in Appendix B of the Members' Code of Conduct, and consider if they should leave the room prior to the item being considered. Further advice can be sought from the monitoring officer in advance of the meeting, but I don't think anybody has sought any further advice. So, have you any pecuniary interest to declare? None declared. Good, we can move on. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 15th September. The minutes of the meeting are have been attached to your papers. Confirmation. Can somebody move them? Before we discuss them, can somebody move them as a true and correct record? And seconded. Thank you. All agreed. Are there any matters arising from the minutes? Simon, excuse me, just before you start. Julia, can I welcome Julia Buckley, a substitute? And if you'd like to, there's a place for you there. If you'd like to join us at the table, you will be very welcome. Julia is a substitute, though not substituting today. She's a substitute or something.
In learning mode.
Good. Right, Simon, the floor is yours.
Is that work? Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of hard work gone into these minutes, and I'm just a little bit concerned about the amount of work that's gone into them, really repeating what is in fact in the documents that we've received. And I'm not sure, now I'm not experienced, as some people in this room, as to how council minutes actually work, but just tracing a sort of stream of consciousness sort of way, the documents that we've received and noted or approved or whatever, I'm not sure that's the most productive way to produce the minutes. And following on from that is, I just wonder if there could be a list of, at the end, like a summary of action points, so that we can then see whether those action points have actually been considered in the agenda that we're going to go through today.
Well, I'm going to go to Tim Collard, our Chief Legal Officer, for a response on that one. I've got to find somebody to voice it on.
Yeah, well, thanks very much, Chair, for that unexpected invitation. I haven't actually seen. I'm just trying to get the minutes up now. I think what you say merits further consideration. Yeah, it does sound like something we should explore.
Tim, I'm quite happy to do this offline, and I really don't want to embarrass anybody in the room. It's just, I mean, it's self-assuring because it's a fairly weighty old read of something which we've already gone through, with actually going through the original documents. So, do you want to do it offline, Tim?
That would be helpful. My comment would be that I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all process to preparing minutes. I think certain committees need more detail because of the potential for challenge. I suppose I'm thinking of planning committees, for example, where there might be an appeal of some kind, and you might want to look back and see exactly what the debate is involved. And there are going to be other committees where a more bullet point style approach would be perfectly acceptable. I don't entirely know how the audit committee likes to function in terms of the amount of information it likes to be recorded, and so that's the only element of this that I'd like to discuss a bit further.
Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a thought about it. All the supporting documents and reports are, apart from anything exempt, is a matter of public record. It's all readily available, isn't it? So I think that Simon's point's really good, actually.
Yes, a good point. Well, I think I'll leave you to have a chat with Tim afterwards,
Yes.
Simon, or at a later stage when we can. Oh, sorry, Roger. My apologies.
Thank you, Chairman. I do note the minutes, but as it is an audit committee, and I think as monitoring officer said, there are some committees that need a little bit more information in the minutes than others. The discussion, I think, does need to be minuted to see that we did discuss and we considered and made the whatever resolution it is. Many other minutes for the council just include the resolution at the end. It does need the explanatory before that, without repeating what is in the reports that were considered. So it is a halfway house, if I can suggest.
Right. Well, I think that will be borne in mind by Tim as well.
It will. Thank you.
Yeah. So if there's no other comment on that, did you have another point in the minutes, Simon? I thought. Right. So no other matters on the minutes. We've agreed that a true and correct record, so we can move on. Public questions. Are there any public questions?
No public questions received.
Good. Member questions? I'm not aware of any member questions. We now move to item 6, first line assurance, IT services improvement of the control environment following various audit reports. This is page 15 of your agenda papers. And we've got David Baker with us, I understand, head of IT. David?
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm David Baker, Head of Automation and Technology. I don't know if I've met all of you yet. I'm new to post. I've been in post for about 2 months now. So nice to meet you all. The report outlines the current position in response to several audit areas, and we've combined them into a single report offering, hopefully to make it easier for you to digest. There's been a renewed focus around contracts and procurements since my appointment, and also the appointment of the Assistant Director covering this area, Ben Jay. We have a number of limited legacy systems, none of which are key corporate systems, and the current information governance and process controls to help manage the risks posed by these legacy systems are contained within the document. The current arrangements to manage third-party contract access has been in place for many years and has proved highly successful in safeguarding internal systems from unauthorized access to the applications and data that we hold. The past 2.5 years has seen an unprecedented fluctuation, really, in the availability of ICT equipment due to all the issues around the world at the moment. And getting supplies has been difficult, and that's forced us to find other ways of addressing the supplies. Shropshire Council has subscribed to Microsoft 365 services since around 2015. And in that time, the functionality has changed quite substantially. And our investment in this area is key to ensuring that we continue to yield the benefits from these services and ensure we get the best efficiencies and cost savings we can for the wider council. There's a strong basis of control arrangements in place within the department, and the digital strategy, which is going to Cabinet in the next couple of weeks, addresses the direction of travel and how that will help us to deliver the Shropshire plan in the future. But the scale and pace of this will be dependent upon the organisational priorities that come out of the target operating model. The council's telephony contracts are also in this, and they underpin quite a crucial area of council business to ensure that we can continue to be stable in delivering services. And we regularly monitor these contracts now via quarterly supplier review meetings, and we hold monthly internal contract review meetings. I appreciate there's quite a lot of information in this report, but I would welcome any questions or observations.
Members? Yes, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the report. I note some of the comments that are in it, but I note the graphs at the back on the information that is where we are. There's a lot there with dates which have not been met, and it says in the future dates are going to be there, and some of them are mentioned as green, even though the dates are into next year. Surprised me. There's amber and there's a blue, which I've not come across before. Green, amber, and red, but blue, I'm not sure what that is.
Inclusive.
Okay, and never look at the start.
It's
Blue
somewhere.
completed implement. Okay, yeah, but there's a number there with green.
Political bias there, you see, to have some blue.
I can't see that. Sorry.
I prefer the red, actually.
Sorry?
I'll,
But seriously, Chairman, there is a number there which says it's date to be actioned and then updated position, etc. And they are marked as green. Can I be assured, will you be assured, that all those that are extended dates are not anything to be concerned with, I suppose?
David?
yes, no problem. So I shared your interest in the colour blue when I first noticed how we measured the RAG rating, which is why I put a key on page 1 of the appendix, so you can understand what those colours actually mean. I would like to see that reduced, to be perfectly honest, to just a standard red, amber, green, and I'm sure that would make sense moving forward so that it's easier for everybody to understand. Green in this instance means that actually the risk is either being managed effectively or it's progressing on target. So even though some of those dates will have passed, it's because we're managing the risk effectively and it's no longer deemed that it's a potential risk for escalation. Then that's why it's in the green category rather than it being in the amber category. But I perfectly take on board what you're saying around the clarification needs to be improved in that area.
And again?
If I can, Chairman, yeah. I noticed that in the on page 25, there's effective controls are in place for the management of our telecommunication contracts. Effective controls are in place for the ICT business support function. Effective management, and I thought there was another one as well. What sort of controls are there? Have they been audited and are they satisfactory? Because it's just a statement, but there's nothing there to back it up. And I know this isn't a scrutiny, so we're not scrutinising it, but as an audit, are there any risks there, or is that those effective controls do not encompass any risks for the council?
No, I don't think they present any risks to the council. The controls we have in place are the regular monitoring we have, both internally and with other colleagues across the council, and then with suppliers as well, to make sure that all of those contracts are effectively being managed. That has increased in frequency since myself and Ben starting, to make sure that we are getting the most effective solutions and also prices from our suppliers, and also trying to look at different avenues of procurement as well. So all of those controls are in place, and we can spell those out in future papers if required to do so.
Okay. Rosemary?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. I just wanted to ask, I've got two questions. One's about telephony, one's about the legacy systems, broadly speaking. I understand legacy systems are more open to cyber attack because they're not updated security-wise, no patches, etc. But there is talk in the report about external providers coming in to effectively do maintenance on those legacy systems. And I just wondered if there's any history of cyber attack or danger in that external sort of entry into our systems from those legacy suppliers, or is that entirely safe? That's one. And shall I ask the other one afterwards?
Okay, so to answer that question, nothing is entirely safe, and anybody who tells you otherwise, quite frankly, doesn't know what they're talking about, because there is always an element of risk involved, and supplier chain attacks is what that's known as. They are becoming more frequent. So in order to ensure that our suppliers are robust, then we are making our suppliers jump through more hoops effectively. So what that means is we're looking closely at their security mechanisms and procedures. We also identify the accounts that haven't been used for periods of time and review them to make sure that they're either disabled or removed completely, so that the access doesn't keep on going when we haven't reviewed it. On top of that, the access is limited to what they can do as well, but there's never any cast iron guarantee that that's not an avenue for attack. So the only way we can ensure that we're doing everything in our power really is to constantly review those accounts and review supplier practices moving forward. It does become trickier with the legacy systems. There are controls you can put in place around things called like just-in-time access. So what just-in-time access is that a supplier would have to contact us for us to turn their account on, for them to then dial in to be able to access the system. And then once the work's been finished, we can turn it off again. So controls like that are being looked at as well to further bolster that security area. But you are correct in picking it up, and as the legacy systems drop away, it will become less of a risk. But it's something we have managed, and we have to keep quite tight controls over at the moment. But I'm glad you picked it up actually, because it's not many people realise the actual risk involved in suppliers in these instances. Does that answer your question okay, or do you want some more information?
No, that's great, thank you. May I ask another question? About telephony, I think in item 7.5, it talks about the fact that our telephony contracts had gone into a rolling status, i.e. we'd gone beyond our contract dates. And I just wonder what the security implications of that were, because I'm imagining once you go past contract, perhaps you lose some security provision. I don't know, but it just seems to me that's not a good position for the council to have been in.
No, and in terms of security, there's no security risk in it. The only risk around it is if the service gets turned off, then you can't provide that service anymore. However, we do have an understanding with suppliers that they don't just turn things off. What happens is you tend to just move into an area of reoccurring billing. With the new controls we've put in place around regular meetings, regular meetings with the suppliers, and regular internal contract meetings, this shouldn't happen again. In the procurement of the new telephony contracts, we've had to procure with the same supplier anyway. And the reason for that is the PSTN switch off. So the PSTN is an older technology that's getting turned off in 2025, and you can't actually re-procure that service at the moment. So if you wanted to put a new PSTN line in, you can't buy one, because the government are trying to get rid of it, so we just can't buy them. So our only option in this instance would have been to re-procure with the same supplier anyway. That being said, yes, it should never have got into that situation, and hopefully it won't get into that situation now with the new controls that we've got in place. But in terms of security, there's no risk there.
Thank you.
Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. It's page 18, 4.8. You talk about a equipment replacement program. I mean, budgets are very tight, and I mean, I'd be concerned that you guys are having to work on the old equipment, which is clunky, and I mean, it's not just security issues around old equipment. I mean, it's a question of whether it's fit for purpose. So, can you just give us a bit of an update on that equipment replacement program?
Yeah, sure. So equipment's been aging, and there's different equipment across the council. Some laptops are relatively new, some laptops are about 7 or 8 years old, which is really not best practice. So this equipment replacement program takes the budgets that were given out to other departments and centralizes it, because what we were finding is that people weren't using that budget effectively. However, managing it centrally allows us to actually identify those areas that need the equipment more. So if you've got a 7-year-old laptop, for example, we're not deeming that acceptable. And what we're doing is rolling these out so that everybody gets up to a level playing field. It means that there's a lot of equipment going out in this first 12 months to make sure that everybody gets up to a required standard, with then a view of actually looking at their equipment on a rolling basis to say that every 3 to 4 years that device should be replaced, because there's plenty of statistics out there that show that yes, security becomes an issue with older devices because the hardware within a device might not have necessary firmware updates. And also on top of that, productivity goes down because they tend to be slower to boot up and things like that. So people spend a lot more time sitting around waiting for the laptops to boot, which obviously we don't want people sitting around waiting for the IT to work. And then also on top of that, there's more failures the older the equipment is. So it takes longer. People have to come in, bring the kit in. So it just wastes everybody's time. So actually ensuring that we have this regular refresh program will make sure that hopefully people are more productive and can do their work better, and we are more secure. It's not going to happen overnight, but we're going to get everybody up to a good standard over the next 12 months.
Yeah, thanks. It's really encouraging to hear. I mean, any laptop over 5 years old in a working environment, we can do it at home, but at work, I would think is extremely awkward. And I just hope that's reflected in the minutes, because I think it's a really important issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Simon. If I may raise a point on 8.3 on page 23, 8.3, in which you say the current posture of the authority and process is reducing the number of active legacy systems within the authority. I sort of query, will that ever happen? The rate of change in IT is always so great that are we not always creating new legacy systems as we reduce the old ones?
That is an interesting take on it. Yes, we are always putting systems in, but the systems that we're putting in are systems that we see are going to be viable for the long-term future. The legacy systems we're talking about here are systems that have been in place for a long period of time and are so wedded to certain areas of the council that it's going to take a lot of effort to remove and identify. The correct procedures moving forward are to look at those systems that we're putting in place and understanding the lifespan of them so that they don't come as a surprise, really. And there's a planned program of replacement, because otherwise you are correct. If you put a system in and forget about it, in 20 years' time, that now becomes the legacy system of the future, which you don't want to be in that position. Yes, the number of systems are reducing, and over time those systems will reduce to a point where all systems within the council should be properly maintained, supported, and within receiving supplier updates. These are systems that are no longer receiving those types of updates from suppliers. So yes, to answer your question, we will eventually get rid of them all. It's not something that can happen easily.
Thank you.
Roger?
Thank you, Chairman. 2 points. First point is to do with telecommunications, which I see is right on the start. And I'm not sure if it's covered by a previous audit report, but I have frustrations, and so do some other councillors. When they ring an officer up at the Shirehall, they get through, it gives 1 or 2 rings and then goes dead. Not possible to leave a telephone message or anything like this with the appropriate officer. That seems to be part of the system that's now introduced using Wi-Fi for the phone system, I think. But it seems to be that you can't leave messages. You can send an email, obviously, but it's good if you're out somewhere, if you can just ring with a quick query or leave a message and maybe somebody get back to it. And then my last comment, Chairman, is that I see revised executive management structure will allow for potential slippage and issues to be effectively managed. It's there twice, 813 and 824, but has that revised structure now been put in place and the slippage being addressed? Thank you, Chairman.
Are you going to answer that, David, or is somebody else going to talk about the revised management structure?
I can talk about that. That's fine. So in terms of leaving the voicemails, that's something I will have to take away and look at. I haven't got the information to be able to answer that now, but I will get back to you. That's not a problem. In terms of the management structure, yes, Ben is now in place. I'm now in place. There is further work to be done with structuring the ICT department as well. And there's a maturity assessment for ICT and a skills assessment happening at the moment as well to understand where we are within that area. And we need to look at, are we delivering the best possible use of those skills? Have we got any gaps in the skills? And does our structure within ICT accurately reflect what we're trying to deliver in the upcoming digital strategy and the Shropshire plan? So that's still ongoing. However, with the new appointment of myself and Ben, yes, there are stricter and tighter controls around how we manage the IT service, because a lot of the previous work was titled waiting for head of service to start, waiting for head of service to start. So now that this is put in place, yes, there are tighter controls around a lot of the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Now, I understand Grant Patterson, our external auditor, wanted to offer a word of advice to us.
Not a word of advice, Chair. It's probably just trying to draw a circle, because I'm not sure David will be on the call come our paper. I've not had the opportunity to meet David yet, so hello, David. In terms of he's only been in place a couple of months. It's just when you get to our report, you will see that there's a couple of recommendations related to IT matters that are still to be resolved. And I think I was just trying to draw that together to the committee's attention, that we will be picking those up with David, and we'll update our report when we get there. But part of that is, of course, that David's only just been in post for a couple of months, so there's some things around sort of generic accounts and user access. So we just really need to work through with David what the process going forward is. So I just wanted to draw that together, because I suspect David won't be here when we get to our paper, but just to say we will be picking those up and reporting back to you at the next audit committee. And probably just to say that, just to draw it all together, just in case. That's what I was going to say, not a specific comment on the paper itself. So.
Thank you, Grant. Now, members, I think we'll move to the recommendations, which are on page 17. We see the recommendations as laid out, and we have considered the contents of the report, and we have, I think, addressed further measures that we would like the officers to investigate. So I'm going to move a further recommendation, or the main recommendation, that the audit committee is satisfied that sufficient progress has been made to address previous committee concerns in the IT function. I'll read that again. The audit committee is satisfied that sufficient progress has been made to address previous committee concerns in the IT function. I will move that. Can I ask for a seconder? You're happy? I mean,
Yeah, I'm going for
right.
party one.
So it is moved and seconded and agreed. Thank you very much. Right. Is that okay, Committee Clerk?
Yes, Michelle should be saying yes, thank you.
Huh?
Yes, thank you.
You've got right. So we've now dealt with that. We move to the second of item 6, which is first line assurance, audit report management response. And I believe we have a different offices.
It's us too.
Right. So the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance, Tim Collard, is now going to take us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just check with David? I see he's. Oh, has he gone?
He didn't waste any time, did he?
He heard his name. And that was that. Well, there are potentially aspects of this that fall over into the IT security world. So I was going to ask David if you could just hang on in case there are any questions that arise in that context. But never mind, we'll do our very best. I need to introduce you to Heather Jones, who is the interim data protection officer. I will do an initial introduction. If you have more technical questions, not of an information security nature, although I'm sure Heather will have a go at answering those as well, but more information governance, data protection nature, then Heather's here to try and answer those. We've been asked to come along and specifically talk about the recommendations arising from two audit reports dealing with information security management and the IT acceptable use policies. We've produced a table without any colour coding, which may or may not help us. But before we get into the detail of that, I just wanted to put a little context to the report. So I think it's probably fair to describe us in something of a transitional stage. We do have plans, and it is mentioned in the report, to appoint a head of governance who will have overall responsibility for information governance, including information security. We're not quite there yet, but I think the interim arrangements that we have in place are working reasonably effectively. You've heard from the information security side of things. They're obviously seeking to protect the council from the incredibly hostile and regular cyber attacks that we have. The information governance team, which is Heather and one other, are more concerned with the data protection side of things. We're also undertaking quite an extensive review. I think that's the right description of all of the policies that relate to this area. We will have an information governance framework sitting over the top of all of that. We will have an information security policy in place, and any number of operational day-to-day type policies that sit under that. They're all being reviewed. We've got a schedule. We will get through them as quickly as we can. We have an information governance, information security group that meets on a monthly basis that reviews those policies, looks at significant data breaches, so kind of keeps a watching eye on what's going on. James has recently introduced what we refer to as IGLUs, the Information Governance Leadership Organisational Oversight Group, that is at director and assistant director level to keep an eye on what's going on. There are some specific recommendations that have been referenced in the table, and very happy to take questions on any aspects of that. If you wish to discuss things particularly relating to, I'd say, cybersecurity, perhaps we can just pause before we get into the detail of that and just decide whether it would be appropriate to go into exempt session, because we want to avoid anything that might place the council's systems at any sort of risk. But subject to that, I think, welcome, Chair, welcome any questions from you.
Just say, Tim, David's back online now, so.
Did you get him back?
I'll go back, yes. So if there are any questions.
Shall I just
Yes, by all means, go back to the beginning.
So David, there are some aspects of the appendix of paper 6B that have Ian Sholmes's name next to them. So just, we don't know what the questions from Audit Committee are going to be, but if they touch on those recommendations, then we'd be very grateful if you wouldn't mind stepping in.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so now back to the Audit Committee. Any questions? I've got one question. If we go to page 55, it's a question on progress. Or at least I've got my note on page 55. But there are a lot of procedures marked early, meaning early 2022, or marked June 22. It gives me concern, obviously, that we've still got these matters that are unresolved. Is sufficient progress being made? I mean, something that was supposed to be dealt with in early 2022 would obviously give me, and I'm sure others, concern that it's still outstanding. What progress are we making in these matters?
Have you got one in particular, which is the
All right, well, we'll go to page 5491. Page 5491.
Sorry, David, that's one with Ian's name. Sorry.
No problem. I'm just finding the document now.
Page 5491. But if you go through the two previous page 53, there are two for June 22. And if you go back to page 51, two more Junes 52, and an early 2022. So there are a considerable number of reports or matters which are quite long outstanding.
And some of which, Chair, relate to information governance rather than David's area. So I'm happy to answer it. If you wanted to start with the one that you've raised with David, and then we can answer the other.
Okay, well, we'll take that as an example.
Okay, so for which one was it? Sorry, is this the one around reporting the incidents with
the one I've got chosen is the very last one on the paper. It's on my page 54, and it said requires attention, and it was required attention in early 2022.
It's page 6 of Appendix B.
Yeah, is this the recording of incident management? Just so I'm answering the correct question here. Sorry, because I've got page 6 on appendix. Yeah. On the appendix, if that's correct, and it's 9.1. Is that correct?
Correct. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I just wanted clarification. The so incident management is happening, and we are recording incidents. This did require attention back in January 2021, and there is a process in place for recording the incidents. I think this is more about ensuring that that's as smooth as possible, and there is a centralised area for recording this. So I don't understand quite why there's the level of reassurance needed on this when we are recording the incidents. It's just making it easier for everybody to see. So it's more of a usability issue rather than actually a recording of the incidents.
Okay. I mean, if we go the two pages, the two previous items, so we're now on page 5. And this is items 5 and 6. We will see that they're down to Tim Collard here, who is with us. Can you give us some reassurance that these matters are going to be speedily dealt with?
I'm going to ask Heather just to comment on that because it's a slightly technical area.
Which one is this one?
It's this one here. Yeah.
I think part of the delay has been because there was a change of officers. So the previous data protection officer left, and there was like a 2-month gap. So we have lost a bit of time with that. but I'm now picking up with ICT security colleagues how we can use the data loss prevention software that we have available, what that means, how we can make that work, and how we can use that to identify incidents and then react to them quickly and maybe spot patterns of behaviour that might lead to them, so we can actually stop them happening before they happen. That makes sense.
Yeah. They will be stopped happening before they happen in the near future.
We can stop behaviours from taking place before an incident actually happens, so we can see maybe changes of behaviour and the things that might escalate, so we can stop them before something happens, so an incident doesn't happen.
Good. Okay, well, I don't want to labour these matters. I leave it with you that I, for one, I'm concerned that there are so many that are the resolution of which is well overdue, and bear that in mind.
Chairman,
Yes, Roger.
I had it down to be picked up, but picking up what you said, on page 2, there's one there, which is June 22, for Ian Jones, Chris Warrender, and it says significant on that, and it makes note about looking for a business case, and a decision around long-term investment will be taken in the new year. Should we be concerned about that?
David's going to answer that.
I'm quite happy to take that question. This is relating to the SEAM system, which enables us to identify and record events that pertain to security across the council. What we have done here is that we've actually gone above and beyond that, and we've actually put in something known as a managed SOC service. So this is a SOC is a security operations center, and as part of that solution, a SEAM is included. So what that means is that this is actually now being managed effectively within that trial. I suppose the risk is if we don't continue with that trial, that's where the risk lies. So there will be some investment required to keep that SOC service moving forward. And to be perfectly honest with everybody, it's absolutely worth its weight in gold. It's been able to help us identify some areas of risk that we hadn't identified previously, which we've now contained and sorted out. It's given us greater visibility across the whole piece. It's enabled 24/7 monitoring that we didn't have in the past as well. So as I'm sure you can appreciate, security incidents don't just happen between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. So that's really, really useful for us. So the risk there really is around if we don't continue this service, then yes, there will be a problem. And I'm sure that business case will be coming quite shortly.
If I can, Chair, just
Yes.
just very briefly on that, just to remind Audit Committee, we did have a few papers around this earlier in the year around where there had been security breaches, and one of the conclusions that the Audit Committee came to was concern around the fact that an incident happened, I think, on a Saturday, and it wasn't picked up until the Monday. So as a result, as David's just said, there is now a trial in place so that risk is covered off in the short term. So we have that 24/7 monitoring. That was a trial to see the benefit of it and was a short-term point. So the reason that particular risk is not managed is because there was an interim solution in place, but we've yet to see the business case for the long-term solution. So it's managing the risk now, but in 6 months' time, if we don't set out a new contract, it wouldn't be.
Okay. Right, ma'am. Yes, Simon.
Yeah, it's a very quick one, actually. I see that, I think it's page 44, 4.2, that there's still people who haven't completed their cyber security training. This is something we, I think, talked about at length. Is there any numbers, percentages, 50, 60, 70, 2, 3, 4%?
Not me.
No accusations, right? It's just, I mean, as the report goes, it's just that open question. Are we talking about most people, or are we talking about one or two outliers?
If I come in, Chair, I don't know, David, whether you've got any up-to-date information or whether Heather has, but in relation to the training that's being undertaken, we have asked for all staff that use IT and all members that use IT to undertake 2 sets of training. And again, it goes back to Heather's point about things happening before they become an incident. This is a way in which we can help to manage that. The numbers were very low. They were down to a very low number. Certainly in terms of staff members, there were a few members. The percentage was considerably higher in members, but then there's only 74, so that obviously works that way. So it's about renewed focus on that on a regular basis. If you keep on chasing people, more people drop off as their training then needs to be renewed. And if you constantly chase, we just need to think of new ways of making sure that hits the impact of that hits.
Well, I think there comes a time maybe with staff that you're simply not doing your job if you aren't, following the requirement that you complete cybersecurity training, and you're not doing your job. You're exposing the council to the self-evident risks. So I don't know, maybe just as a thing to minute is a percentage number, just so that we can feel comfortable.
We have the lady.
Thank you for that, James.
Didn't we say it was 90 plus in the Igloo meeting last week? I had a feeling it was 90.
There's a requirement for us to be at plus 90%. That's our target.
Oh, okay.
And we're well in excess of that have completed that. But in terms of the actual numbers, it's in that remaining 10%. I think it's actually above 95%. But it's not 100%, which is always a very, very difficult number to hit.
There are members who are ill or staff members who are off.
Thanks.
Yep, okay. Rosemary, please.
Just a small point. I think there should be some incentivisation for members to do this as well, or a disincentive for not doing it. Let's say rather. I think last year that I think that the leader spoke to the leaders group and dealt with the individual members.
You'd be cut off. You wouldn't have access to your emails if you didn't do it.
Yeah, I think we should be that harsh actually.
Oh, right.
I think it's absolutely essential. You're not doing your job if you're not doing your
Well, I
job.
think I'm really interested in what you think an appropriate sanction should be.
Not having access to the system.
You can't get on its training.
So you, Chairman,
True.
you
That is
don't
true.
have access to the Shirehall. You receive emails because they can be sent to their private address, but they can't get into the system.
Well, Nigel says quite rightly, you wouldn't then be able to complete the training, but you'd have to find a way to.
Or you'd have to contact IT and they'd have to let you in.
To
And
let
the
you in.
only thing you'd be able to do is to
Absolutely.
complete the
Yeah.
training before you could
Yeah.
access them.
I think it's absolutely essential, isn't it? It's
Well, I think
essential
we'll
part of
leave
doing
that
the
to the
job.
leaders to decide what they,
I'm just interested. That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
leave that to the group leaders to decide how they want to deal with that. One of their joint meetings. Right, well, we've considered the report. I suggest that we accept the report, having noted a number of concerns, which I'm sure the officers.
Yeah. Well, I said we were in a transitional stage. I completely accept those concerns.
Right, yeah, okay. Well, carry on transitioning then. And for the time being, the committee will accept the report. Agreed? Thank you very much. Now, item 7, payroll control improvements. I'm going to use my chairman's discretion to move this to the last item before we reach the private discussions before we exclude press and public. There are certain aspects of this which have security concern. Obviously, I won't go into now in open committee. So this item is being deferred and will be taken last before the break, so that if necessary, we can, or certain items within it can be moved into private session. So we now go on to item 8, which, as you will see, is second line assurance, Treasury Secretary mid-year report. James will introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Treasury Strategy mid-year review. This will go on to consideration by Cabinet on 14th of December and then on to full council 15th of December. So this is the Treasury Strategy that was produced in February 22 and as per best practice within SIPA's Code of Practice on Treasury Management, we are requested to take a mid-year strategy report through a committee which has responsibility for consideration of the Treasury Management function. So the executive summary sets out what the report contains. So there's the economic update. Obviously, there's been a lot of changes around the economic position. A lot of it happened just after September time. So we will see that feeding its way through, but the impacts on the money market has been quite considerable over the last few weeks and months. There's the review of the strategy and the investment strategy. No major changes in relation to those, and then we look at the investment portfolio, the borrowing strategy. The debt rescheduling is there as a title, so that it's a catch-all should we do any debt rescheduling, but we haven't done any of that for several years and won't be doing that probably for until the rules change around the opportunities of that. And then finally, there's the compliance with the limits. The paper itself demonstrates that the team has exceeded the benchmark in terms of investment. That said, with the rising base rate that continues to move upwards, that change in the benchmark, and then dependent on the level of the timing and lengths of the investments that are undertaken, can push you very close to that benchmark. If you've got a lot of 12-month investments at the lower rate, and then the base rate moves, benchmark moves, you're still held into those longer term investments at that period. So that's why you're seeing in some of the information here, we're getting quite close to some of those benchmarks. Ultimately, we still rely on the SLY acronym for this, which is security, liquidity and yield in considering any investments. And Audit Committee have received training in relation to Treasury Management in the last 12 months. So happy to take any questions as necessary.
Seems a very satisfactory report, as it usually is on Treasury Management. We're good on our Treasury Management. Any comments, or everybody happy? Roger's got a comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I note on page 10 of the report, I'm not sure of the page in the bundle, where we have placed our money, and one that strikes me in particular was that we placed it with one council at 0.1%, which was maturity the 4th of October. So I assume it might have been reinvested, but what happened? Because it's totaled there in the total, so I presume it may have been reinvested or used for cash flow purposes. Not sure, but when funds do mature, it follows on the list, and I see it goes down there till the 20th of September is the last one. So it won't have appeared, but I'm assuming that's been reinvested at the market rates that is now, or are we looking at the finances? Because I see some of them are invested into the new financial year, next year, and we will be looking at the budget in the not too distant future, and February agreeing the budget for the new financial year. So some of that money may be needed to deliver some of the council resolutions that are made in February to start in April. It's a little bit involved there, but I think.
Yeah. Okay. So just to clarify, so this is the mid-year strategy. So it will only take us up to the end of September. So you won't get information that follows beyond that. In terms of the particular question that you've asked there, this is about investment of the cash, so it's entirely separate to the budget process. This is the cash that's held within the organisation at any particular time. So this relates more to levels of debtors and creditors, levels of capital receipts, levels of reserves, SIL, Section 106. It's that cash that's sat there rather than the year in which it's budgeted for. So where we have an investment that was maturing on the 4th of October, the likelihood is that there was some event, some large payment, let's say, that was due on or around that date. So I can't find the example that you're talking about, but I mean, you've got the figure to hand, but let's say that was £5 million or something.
It is 5 million.
Then that £5 million, there's the calculation that's done by the Treasury team is what payments will we be making out over each period of the month. So on the 20th of the month, salary payments for the majority of the local authority staff go out, and that can be in the order of £10 million. So on the 19th or 20th of the month, you would expect investments to mature so that the cash is in the bank to enable those payments to be made. So the overall figure within the cash figures are about 43 million, I think it is at the moment. Of that 143 million, some of it will be invested long term because we don't need that cash immediately, and we can get a better return by tying it up for up to 12 months. We don't tend to go beyond 12 months. Others are then, so if you tied up 143 million for 12 months, you've got no money to pay anything. So when the Kia invoice, when the Veolia invoice, when the staff salaries, when those big events go through, you haven't got the cash in the bank because it's invested out there. So those will mature. So that 5 million may have come in on the 4th of October. It may well have been that there was a payment on the 5th of October. Had there not been, had it just been because we need to make sure there's enough cash flow in the system. So there may be some payments coming in the middle of October. So we'll have some maturing at that point so we can then review it. If those payments weren't there, it may have been invested for a week or a few days or a month or even longer, depending on the information that we have at that particular point in time. So the crucial elements for managing the Treasury management position is knowing what payments are going out when. And that's fundamentally what it comes down to. It doesn't, the budget position is a completely separate element to that.
Okay. Well, members are asked to agree the Treasury strategy updates. I'm not sure I can agree them because I couldn't disagree them. No. So members are asked to accept the Treasury strategy updates as set out in the report. All agree? Oh, acceptable. Thank you. That's item 8. Item 9, annual audit committee self-assessment. You'll all remember that we had a special session on assessing ourselves as to how we felt we were coping with our responsibilities. Well, I'll ask James to take this forward since his name is attached to the report. James.
Thank you, Chair. So very quick introduction. As you said, self-assessment regularly undertaken, training was given, and consideration of that was worked through by the committee. The way that we normally do this is to provide within the appendices in Appendix A and C where we are in terms of the self-assessment, and in Appendix B is the training requirements that we've identified. And then within the body of the report, which is section 7.8, we then have those areas that we have identified where we believe there is partial compliance with the code. So we tend to be quite hard on ourselves as a committee. So unless we can demonstrate we have complete and utter technical compliance, we then tend to state that there is partial compliance. This demonstrates the areas where we can progress our thinking or our opportunity to improve that situation. If I just take you to the Appendix A, which starts on page 6 of the particular report, I believe. In Appendix A, you will notice at question 13, there is a not applicable there. So we have the 4 partial compliance, and then we have the 1 non-applicable. This question relates to have independent members appointed to the committee been recruited in an open and transparent way and approved by full council. So the reason this is not applicable is because we haven't recruited an independent member to the audit committee. So we would comply with that if we did, because we would go through that process, but we haven't. So the question, we've done some research into this, and across the Midlands we found that around about half of the local authorities have an independent co-opted member onto their audit committee. And when we had the LGA financial peer review back in June, one of the recommendations that came out of that was that audit committee should consider an independent member to that. So this is a co-opted member who's not a member of the council, is completely independent, and would just bring an alternative view to and challenge to audit committee. So on the back of that, my recommendation would be that as audit committee you consider that and consider appointing some co-opted member onto the committee. The reason that's not been pulled together into a paper asking you to consider this is because it's not a decision for audit committee, it's a decision for full council. Full council decides what the makeup of the individual committees is. However, it would be helpful to have just a conversation, discussion around that, because if audit committee were vehemently opposed to that, then that would obviously colour me progressing that as an option.
Simon.
Yeah, thanks, James. Is this the appropriate time to have that discussion which you've just referred to? It's good. We had a bit of correspondence on it, particularly around the cost of an independent member, and I got the impression that the cost was de minimis, which is encouraging, though I'm rather perplexed as who actually would do a task like that, apart from our good selves, for de minimis, virtually for expenses only. So who is this mythical independent person that you're referring to? What would their background be?
So, so if I may share a couple of things on that. Within the organisation, we have, for example, the pension board, and the pension board has 6 members on it, employee or member, and member representatives. Again, they aren't paid. We just look for volunteers, people who just want to give their time and are interested in these particular areas. That said, we're not flooded with applications, so I take your point absolutely. But nevertheless, we have 6 at the moment in that particular area, and there are other committees that I've worked with the authority for over 20 years now, and I'm aware of a number of different committees, scrutiny committees, etc. over time, where it's just been a volunteer who would like to come in to look into this. It would be an interested member of the public, somebody who wants to look at a little bit more detail into the way that the council works and the process behind that. I'd expect somebody probably with a more technical financial background would be somebody to be interested.
Yeah, thanks, James. I just think as we progress this, job description, that is made clear as to who would be appropriate.
Yeah,
Rosemary, please.
I mean, that's to say, I mean, it's a parallel position surely to being a school governor, being a non-executive charity trustee, being a non-executive board director. My experience in life has been that those people are actually invaluable on committees, so I would very much welcome having someone external. And I mean, I understand totally Simon's point of view, but I actually think there are quite a lot of people in society who are prepared to give back in that sense. Someone with the right experience would be perfect. Not easy to find, but a real good addition to the committee, in my opinion.
Nigel?
Yeah, just saying a good idea, but it has to be somebody that has got a skill set that will add value for us. It can't be a member of the public who just wants to come along and learn something, because I'm not sure that will add value to the community.
Yes, I think, just following that point up, I would like to ensure that in our job description, it's made quite clear that we would expect the external member to do the same training that we're expected to do. Okay, my view is that we have worked very happily. I was first chaired this committee when it was formed in 2005, that was our first audit committee, and all bar 5 years since then I have chaired this committee, and we have managed to muddle through it with a fair degree of satisfaction, and our audit staff have carried us through because they've been nominated for all sorts of prizes within the profession. So we've not done too badly. However, it apparently is general government policy to have an external member, and in addition, as James has said, our assessment of 6 months or whatever it was ago has recommended we have an external auditor. So having heard Rosemary's strong commendation, I suggest that we agree.
Just before you say the next little bit, can I just bring one further thing in? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
It will create a balance. There'll be 6 people if they have voting right. There's no voting right.
No voting rights. Sorry. I should have made that clear through you, Chair. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right.
A cooperative member would be here, would be able to contribute to the discussion, would be able to challenge and ask questions at the Chair's discretion, but would have no opportunities for voting. And another point within that is we may say, actually, you would be able to join the meetings virtually, because that might help just encourage people to, because if they can't vote, there's no need for them to be absolutely in the room. So there's a number of ways in which we can try and encourage people into that.
Sorry about that.
So overall, my suggestion is that the audit committee concur with the suggestion that a suitable external member should be recruited. Would members be happy to agree to that? Okay, James, so you can carry that forward. Back to our own self-assessment. Had you finished your comments on that?
Yeah.
Members, anything to add to the self-assessment we've already done? We, arising out of that, we had agreed certain training subjects for our next 2 or 3 lots of training. So shall we accept the recommendations? Provide the necessary input to enable the action plan to be reviewed and revised to include areas of weakness. I think we've done all that. So the recommendations before us, shall we agree the recommendations? Thank you. We now come to the item 10, internal audit charter. This starts on my page 91 and your page 91. Well, this is Katie's report. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report on the internal audit charter. It comes to committee annually for review. As you can see in the executive summary, the charter is considered on an annual basis, and it summarises there the key changes. There's no significant changes to report. Annex B has been updated with our current clients, and minor tweaks made to remove references to the head of internal audit and replacing those with chief audit executive. So the interim, myself and Barry Hanson are filling in whilst the head of governance role has been appointed to. The headlines to take away from the report is this is a requirement under public sector internal audit standards. The charter defines internal audit's position within the authority and their responsibilities and the position within the organisation, and interprets how the public sector internal audit standards are demonstrated within our team. To make it easier to identify the changes, you'll see in Appendix A they're identified in bold, italics and underlined. As I said, there's nothing significant to report other than a change of terminology.
Thank you, Katie. We consider this every year, There haven't been any significant changes for a number of years because there's no significant change to the framework or background to the charter. So can we endorse the internal audit charter? All agreed? Thank you. We now move on to item 11, internal audit performance. And Katie is going to take us through this again. Item 11, page 111.
Thank you, Chair. This is an update on the internal audit performance since the last committee in September. The headlines are 42% of the revised plan has been completed, which is below our previous delivery records. Since the last committee, we've finalised 6 reasonable, 1 limited and 2 unsatisfactory assurance opinions. And within the 125 recommendations, 1 of them was fundamental. The decisions for the committee to make to note performance against the plan and to identify any actions that they wish to take in response to the low assurance levels, fundamental recommendations, which I'll bring to your attention later in the report, identified in paragraph 8.6 and Appendix A, Table 3. The main body of the report from section 8 onwards details the performance in this period. The pie chart at paragraph 8.4 shows our position within the planned audits for the year. So you can see we've completed 23% as final reports. So we've got 22% in progress and 3% at draft, with 52% of the plan not started yet. As I said, that's below our previous delivery records, but as we've identified at other committee meetings, we've had resourcing challenges and we've brought in additional resources to supplement the plan. Our external contractors have engaged with the business and started completing those audits, but the results of those haven't come through yet. So there is a time delay in being able to complete that work. The paragraph 8.5, there's a bar chart there that shows the split of audits planned against the actual audit days delivered in those areas. And then in paragraph 8.6 gives you the breakdown of all the audits we've completed in this period with their assurance ratings and the recommendation categories. Areas to highlight, paragraph 8.10 identify through to 12 identifies the repeat, unsatisfactory and limited areas. So we have Acton Scott is unsatisfactory for a 2nd time. Much Wenlock Leisure Centre is unsatisfactory for a 3rd time, and Purchase Ledger is limited for a 3rd time. So the question for members is to ask what action they wish to take in relation to those. Paragraph 8.15 identifies the fundamental recommendation made within the individual service fund audits, and that relates to the team preparing an investor save proposal to address a backlog in their workload. And they have completed one previously, but it wasn't progressed at that time. So the recommendation there is that they resubmit the proposal, and they're planning to do that by February 23. Paragraph 8.17 identifies the other areas within our audit team work where we've added value. You can see the detail there. That's all the areas I need to draw your attention to, but happy to take any questions in relation to the audit performance.
Before I bring members in, I just want to remind everybody of the background. When you first look at the report, you see how far below previous years we are in terms of completions. It obviously gives some degree of concern. However, we must remember this has been a time of very considerable change in our internal audit situation. There's been a change in the framework following the retirement of Kevin Pulowski. We're having a new, what do we call him, the new guy?
Head of governance.
New head of governance, which we haven't had before, who will have overall oversight of audit. We've had very number of staff changes within the audit team. There are a number of resignations which have led to a considerable amount of time being spent on recruitment. We have recruited people. Problem is that they're having been recruited, they then need training in our methods and the way we operate audit. And our Katie and the rest of the senior management left within audit have had to spend considerable time training new people. So there's been a lot of background which demands our understanding of why we have completed less this year than previous years. And I am satisfied that despite the fact that we have done less, those audits have been done to the same standard. There have been no shortcuts to try to achieve critical mass, try to achieve figures that show higher audit. So having put that sort of background before you, we can now move on that members may ask matters on the report. Rosemary.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally understand those comments that you made, Brian, and accept them. My question was about Much Wenlock Leisure Centre. So it's had an unsatisfactory rating for the third time since 2016, which is quite some record, I think. It seems to me that it's quite a record, but I've read later in the report, I'm not sure where, unfortunately, but it says that the centre responded positively to the previous unsatisfactory audits. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so that suggests to me that so this is for the third time that they've been found to be unsatisfactory. They have complied with audit on the previous two occasions, yet they're still unsatisfactory. So that to me points to something wrong with perhaps the way. Could it be that the audit's not right? Could it be that the centre is fundamentally flawed in some way in the way it's managed? I don't know, but it sounds to me like a huge alarm bell that despite complying with audit recommendations, that the organisation is still unsatisfactory.
I think if I pick up that point, that in terms of the engagement during the audit, they were very happy with the process. The issues that are around, there have been some staffing issues and staff changes during that time and some sickness, which has led them. So, and it's that difference between the first line assurance and the third line assurance. So when we said they'd complied with it, the management assurance we were receiving was yes, we've made those changes and we're happy that they're in place. When we come in and do the audit and look into the detail and the evidence, they haven't embedded in practice. So they've made some changes that they believe have addressed the issue, but looking at in the audit of the evidence, it didn't back up that assertion. So
officially,
they've made some changes that they thought it addressed it, but it didn't fully address it. So those recommendations remained outstanding when we went back in to assess.
May I? Yeah, and that implies to me then again, should there be an audit, an unsatisfactory result, and then a gap to the next audit? Should there be some sort of post-audit audit? Yeah, where you know that sort of compliance is actually investigated in some way. I know it's just more work, but
well,
it seems that might be likely.
Unsatisfactory will feature in a follow-up audit. The timing of that we agree with the management, but it's based on their target implementation dates. So if you have a situation where they're saying they haven't had time to address it and it's taken longer, we'd raise that with the executive directors and we would delay going back in to do the audit. We've got to target our resources in the best way and make sure there's no point in us going back in if they're telling us already at the first line assurance that they haven't addressed it. So in this instance, we went back in on the advice that they had addressed it. And this is where we get to the point with these. At the third time, there comes on where we've done this before with other audit areas. We say at this point, there's no value in us going in because we've been 3 times and it's still not in place. And that's then for the committee to decide what action. So with the other ones, you can request a management assurance or other methods we've done before, an interim update to the committee by email.
Let me take that on from what you have said, Katie. and indeed what Rosemary has said. If you look at items 8.10, 8.11 and 8.12 on page 117, Acton Scott, Much Wenlock Leisure Centre and the Purchase Register, we are asked, what do members want to do? It is my view that we should have a management update at our next meeting. And I am recommending to members that we have a management update on all three items at our next meeting. Roger.
I'll second that, Chairman. I think it's there, and it's because it isn't the first one. I think the audit committee does need to have that management update.
Yes, I mean, when it's the third time, if any man knew discourse or impediment, well, these people. Yes, thank you, Roger, for that support. So, shall we resolve in relation to those three aspects, Acton Scott, Much Wenlock and the purchase ledger, that we shall have a management update at our next meeting? Note that we have resolved that, please, committee clerk. Agreed. Other items.
I have got a comment, but you resolved it before I.
Oh dear, unresolved.
Okay, I have concern that all three appear on the same meeting. It depends how much we've got to get through in that meeting anyway. Because the actual thing says at a future meeting, which is not necessarily the same one. Have we got the capacity on the next meeting to tackle all three of them?
As long as we can get through by about 4:30 in the afternoon. You're all right.
Just very quickly, Chair, there is a report, I believe, being taken forward to Cabinet around Acton Scott. And it may well be that we wait for the decision around that before the committee consider what they want to do. So that might be one that you just take off the agenda for now.
Yeah.
Which then just reduces it down to the other two. If that helps.
Okay, so what have we resolved? Not to take any action on Acton Scott till we've seen the cabinet report. Yes, there is going to be a cabinet. Yeah.
There is. Yeah.
Okay. So we will. Thank you for that, James. We will change our resolution to wait for the cabinet report on Acton Scott, but to have a management review at our next meeting. I'm sure it can be fitted in now, so I'll make sure that you're not here all day on that one. Any other matters on the report?
Where my kick-off about the minutes was, there was nothing about that at all. But I may be wrong. Maybe we didn't ask the dog warden to come with a management.
It was not the last meeting, probably one.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was.
But we haven't seen the dog. We were.
That's right.
There's one we were there, but we haven't seen the dog warden. So if the minutes don't reflect what we actually agree, and I take it back if we didn't agree, I'm absolutely order. But in this case, then the minutes must reflect that what we've just decided.
Yeah, I agree. And in relation to the dog warden, do we? What is the situation? Are we still? Can you recall whether we are still, as an audit, unhappy with the dog warden procedure, the assurance relating to the dog warden?
Yeah, you did ask for the dog warden report to come to this committee meeting, but we had to remove it from the agenda because they weren't able to provide a report at this meeting. I have followed up with them for an assurance on where they are with it, and they're looking to bring a report to the February-March meeting. There's been some staff changes in that area as well. There's been a number of key posts that have left and staff sickness, which has delayed, so they've got somebody new overseeing it, but to give them time to understand where they are with it. They want to understand what's outstanding.
I get that, thanks. I just felt that it was, I mean, I do seem to have that recall, but it was going to go completely under the radar. So thank you for that And before Roger, can I just add one more? I fully recognise what Brian was saying about the dislocation that the internal audit function's gone through, and also that you've kept, and I really would continue to support that you've kept the thoroughness of the approach that you've taken. You know, don't find the quick route. But if it's 42% at this stage, 90%, I think you say by the end, which is in the zone, I would reflect that I think this is on a lower number of days than it was last year, and that hasn't come out in the report. So my concern would be that we keep doing 90% of a lower number. I think my maths says this doesn't look good as an audit function. It looks like maybe the foot's coming off the accelerator.
If I may, Chair, if I come in there and Treasurer Barry may wish to comment, the important point around internal audit assurance is that assurance is provided across the organisation, given a risk-based assessment of the key areas, a balanced audit plan that ensures that there is sufficient consideration of the internal control framework to enable an internal audit opinion to be provided at the end of the year. Now, there is a point at which, if you go below, you can't provide that assurance. Now, are we below that? No, we're not. Are we getting closer to it? Yes, absolutely. And there is a question, I suppose, in reality, if you're above it, if you then add more resource in, you get above, you move further away, but incrementally, you're not moving significantly away. You're just, creating more base information to enable that assurance to happen. So this goes back to the point that was made earlier around some of the contractors that have been brought in. So had we not brought in those contractors to do pieces of work over the autumn and winter period, we would not have received the 90% of the plan, which is the position we need to be in to provide that assurance. So while that's not ideal, we have to keep that in balance all of the time. So you may have the point's been made, you may have a staff of 20 people, but if they're all trainees or apprentices, then you're not going to get the assurance you need. So you may say, well, actually 3 or 4 external contractors that come in at a high level and can deal with 20% of the audit plan over here, that may be slightly less efficient. It may not be the best way that we want to do it, but nevertheless, it ensures we have that sufficient coverage to enable us to provide that audit assurance at the end of the year. And ultimately, it is about audit assurance. It is third level, third line of defence. It's not to say that there is, it's not about particular elements of fraud or whatever that might be. It's about that assurance across the board. So you'll have some specifics. We talked about much Wenlock, for example. That's a particular establishment within the organisation that will be reviewed. There will then be reviews of strategies and policies at a different level that provides a different cut through the organisation in terms of that assurance. So the plan is not only ensuring that we deliver 90% of the plan, but it's that the plan is always reflective of the things that need to be covered to ensure that we provide that assurance at the end of the year.
Now you know. Anything else, Roger?
Yeah, picking up on the dog warden as well. I thought we were raised queries about the ERP system, and they were due to come back to give because it was the IT ERP. I thought I'd read it somewhere.
If I may, Chair, just very quickly, at the start of the meeting, the Chair deferred the payroll paper to shortly in the agenda. We just moved it from the beginning of the agenda to the end.
Okay.
That's probably what you're thinking about in terms of.
Okay.
We've had the discussion about IT, purely around the payroll. That's coming shortly.
Okay. Right, members, shall we accept the report?
Chairman.
Right.
Fundamental recommendation, a question for individual service funds. if you're happy to accept the position, or if you want any other assurance in that area.
Sorry, where?
Page 118.
Yeah, page 117 to 118. Paragraph 8.15. That starts the, but there's a fundamental recommendation
Oh, sorry, yeah.
on individual service plans.
Right, what do members want to do about that? Do members wish to receive any updates from managers on any of the remaining low assurances? I begin to get concerned as following up what Nigel said earlier on about the assurances we're trying to fit onto one agenda.
But could I suggest with that, and to look at the implementation date is February 23, that you might want to receive an interim update, if you're happy to receive that via email following that, and consider it at a later committee.
Chairman, there is a request later on to have another extra meeting in January, I think, to be considered later on in the agenda because of the external audit, I think. So there may be another meeting coming in, depending on what the decision later on is. And that may ease the agenda congestion, if I can use that word.
Thank you, Roy. Yeah, that's a good point. We're going to be very shortly going to consider the date and times of the next meeting, and I have a suggestion to make. So, in relation to this as well as January. So let's leave the question of the dates for the next meetings for the moment, and let's agree to Katie's suggestion that she updates us on this particular matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on this report? Right. So, shall we note the internal audit report? We've expressed some concerns at the overall situation, but understand that this has been brought about by so many staff changes. So, if you look at the decisions, the committee is asked to consider and endorse the performance against the 22-23 audit plan, and we've identified any actions we wish to take, I think. All agreed? Right. Thank you very much.
Brian, you may just wish to add to that what James said about that the level of assurance overall is still being complied with. I mean, just for the minutes. Sorry, I should.
Well, I'm sure it's not only James, but Barry and Katie would concur with that as well. So let us minute then that the committee received assurance that the standard of audit and the level of assurance was not in any way diminished by the reduced staff resources. Okay. We now come to the external audit PSAA appointment. This is really just a matter of report, isn't it, James?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I won't give a very long introduction, but basically public sector audit appointments is responsible in our case for appointing external auditors from the 23-24 financial year. Under the appointing persons regulations, they have reviewed across the country all those that opted in to provide an external audit firm to each local authority. So in October, we were written to by the PSAA to say that Grant Thornton had been successful in winning that contract, and they would be the auditor then for Shropshire Council and Shropshire County Pension Fund, and I believe they're also for fire service, and so there's the main areas within the Shropshire area would be the auditors for the 5-year period from 23-24. So the current financial year 22-23 that we're in now, at the end of this financial year in May 23, that would then be audited, and that will be the final contract final audit of the current contract. And then the 23-24, which will be audited in 24 onwards, will be the first year of the new contract. There's a few changes that were made under the contracting arrangements, which are identified toward the end of the report in 8.4, but fundamentally we've been asked for our opinion in relation to the decisions that have been taken. We are happy and we've confirmed that we are comfortable with the Grant Thornton being our auditor going forward.
Yes, thank you. So we're pleased to say, Grant, that we'll welcome you again for a further extended period, and we should look forward to the benefit of yours and Mary's good advice for years ahead. Right, which brings me on to the fact, so shall we accept that report? All agreed, yeah. Brings me on to your spot on the agenda, item 13.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Sorry, and yes, we are. Yeah, we're looking forward to working with you going forward. Under the new contract, and happy to take any questions on that. Primarily, the paper today, though, in front of you is where we are on the 21-22 audit in respect of progress. I mean, I think progress. Well, I'll let Mary take you through the report in detail. As I say, we were initially hoping to come to you today with a sort of a finalised AFR and being close to concluding the audit. Mary will give you an update. I think the work is progressing satisfactorily. The key issue, I suppose, in terms of delay is linked into the fact of the national sector issue around accounting for infrastructure assets, around which we are expecting a statutory instrument from the department next week. And until we actually see the final details of that, it's difficult for both yourselves as the council and us as auditors to work out exactly what work we need to undertake in response to that. And that does link into the conversation you were just having around the timing of the next audit committee. I mean, what I'll do is if I stop now and hand over to Mary, and she'll take you through the paper, and then if we come back to questions at the end. So over to you, Mary.
Thanks, man. Hello, everyone. Again, so as Grant said, I'll take you through a high-level page turn. What I'll try and do, obviously, there's been a time lag from when the report was written to where we are now. I'll try and give you that update as to what's moved on, or maybe what hasn't. But that isn't the case, to be fair, as we move through the report. So as Grant mentioned, there is a delay in relation to where we go on infrastructure assets, but hopefully our work will be concluded in all substantive areas before the Christmas break, which in reality is probably the middle of December as leave commitments start to fall in. So we are on track with that, but there will be areas we need to tie off in relation to infrastructure assets. There was a delay to the start of the audit, so we acknowledge that we didn't start the audit until 3 weeks after we originally planned. But as always, the central finance team have worked with us proactively to get things moving along as well. We have noticed some delays when we move outside of the central finance team. We have come up with a few blockages with getting information through, and I think it'd be fair to say central finance have experienced that a little bit as well, but we are working through those, and for some of those areas they have actually moved on now. We're looking to build our exposure to the wider team as part of the 22-23 preparation for that audit, so we get more contact with people outside of central finance, and it does move pressure away obviously as well from central finance if we get to jump on other people, if we can put it that way. So I'll take you through the more of the detail within the report. I'll try not to duplicate because there are a few points that do come up throughout. So apologies for the very small page numbering, but if I could just take you through to page 4 of our report, and that's still on the headlines page. Just a couple of points to pick out there. We are progressing with 2 objections, which we are moving along. We hope to release a provisional review on one of those objections shortly. On the second one, there are a few communications which are still ongoing, and again, we will update you with as soon as we get to a position on that one. So those are moving along. So thanks to everyone involved in that. I realise internal audit have been involved in quite a lot of this information as well. If I could now take you through to the progress summary, and that's on page 6. A lot of these points have moved on. I won't go into a great amount of detail, but just to provide some high level messages here. We've now completed our work substantially on investment property and the title deeds work. We do have some queries, but substantially that work is now complete and will be reviewed by Grant. We've clarified the point regarding to TechForge, an interface process, which we needed to gather some more understanding on around those transactions. Our work on financial instruments is now complete. This is, by the way, just moving down the orange traffic light, if we want to call it that. Our work on housing benefits payments, that's now complete and subject to review. And our work on journals, which is again complete and subject to review. So there's quite some chunky areas of the audit, to be honest, which I'm happy that they have progressed and now subject to review processes. We've also completed our work on the PFI disclosures and leases and the council's capital commitment disclosures, which we do have a few queries, but that the work is substantially complete. So the other areas are still in progress, and again, the timeline to completion is the middle of December, with the exception of the infrastructure point, which we need to close off once we get the Christmas Day prize of the statutory instrument, which is wonderful timing, isn't it? So, if I could just take you through to page 7, this page will be very familiar. It's set out in our audit plan, and it's our levels of materiality work too within the audit. So this hasn't changed. We revisit this constantly throughout the audit. If there are any pointers where additional risk may have been identified for you as an organisation, this would trigger us to review it. It remains consistent. So your headline materiality for the group is 9 million, and it is 8.9 million for the single entity accounts. We report for your perspective any error we identify above £445,000, which we refer to as our level of triviality. We would report that within this as part of our audit findings report to you. So that's the level where you get to know of any particular issues. We do not, however, have a materiality level for senior officers. We think it's an area that's quite sensitive. So all senior manager transactions are tested in that case. If I could just take you through now to the significant risk areas. These start on page 8. From a practical perspective, significant risks command really more than half of our audit time. They're areas specifically required in the ISA as they require special audit consideration, and this can often be because these items are obviously of a high material value. They involve both management and auditor experts and quite a volume of critical judgment as well. So it does take a significant portion of the audit time. Again, these will be very familiar to some of you. They generally don't change drastically across audit years as well. The first significant risk we have to consider, and this is a mandated risk per the ISAs, and it is present in all audits, is that of management override of control. We generally cover this work as part of our journal consideration of your journal environment, your consideration of estimates and critical judgments as well. Our work is still in progress in certain areas, however, it is well progressed, and at this point, we haven't got any issues that we need to raise with you at this point. Again, if I could take you over to page 9, there is the presumed risk of fraud in revenue recognition. Again, this is something we have to consider as part of the audit. However, we can rebut this risk, and in your case, we have done so. So we do not consider that there's a significant risk for the council in this area. And our work, with the exception of work around council tax reliefs and NDR reliefs, that work is substantially complete. We also have to consider fraud risks related to expenditure recognition, and this is where practice note 10 comes in, and ultimately in conjunction with practice note 10, we've also rebutted that risk for you as an organisation. Again, our work on operating expenditure has moved on. This covers operating expenditure and housing benefit expenditure as well. That work is substantially complete and is now subject to review by myself and Grant for those items. On page 10, we take you through property, plant and equipment. This is an area which involves the use of both management experts and also our valuation expert as well. It's a highly complex area, and I will certainly not to profess to be an evaluation expert, but that's why we have our own. There have been some issues identified which are still ongoing, but substantially the work is complete. We do have some queries regarding gross internal audit, gross internal areas. This is one of the key inputs into your valuation, and last year we did identify this as a point, and the estates team have, taken up the baton and engaged an expert and really tried to push the accuracy in this area. So we're pleased to see that the council and estates have actually moved this one forward, and certainly going into 22-23, the basis for those areas will be sound ultimately. We have, however, noticed that there are some inconsistencies which we just need to iron out between what we were provided as part of the 2021 audit and now what appears to be within the 21-22 audit. So we just need to tie those off and make sure that we're satisfied with the accounting treatment and particularly the valuation treatment in relation to void areas. And the council has engaged another valuer to carry out this gross internal audit work. Gross internal auditor. I'll get my terminology right in a minute. Gross internal area work. They have engaged a new valuer, which we do have to go around set procedures regarding that valuer as well. So once the information is through, they should be relatively quick to tie off, but obviously we do need to go around that loop. If I could just take you through to page 11, our work at the time of writing the report, our work on council dwellings, we hadn't received the response from the council's management expert. We have received those responses now, and the team are working through them. So that should be being drawn to a close quite soon. If I could just take you through to the page 12. This is relating to your pension fund net liability. Our work on this area is substantially complete. The council did receive an updated IAS 19 report, which has triggered an adjustment. It ultimately is a change to your return on plan assets, and it is an increase in the return on plan assets by 8.7 million, and it affects your net liability is a reduction to that. And ultimately, by making this adjustment, albeit we do need to see the revised accounts, the council's taken a prudent approach with a level of materiality of 8.9 million. If this hadn't been adjusted and there are further issues, audit adjustments which come up, it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room. So by making this adjustment, the council has taken the prudent approach here. One of the areas which always brings a smile to my face is that Grant needs to, as the pension fund auditor, Grant will need to write to himself and provide necessary assurances. So I always find it quite amusing but but there are no issues to identify as part of that process, and that will be tied off shortly. If I can take to page 13, these aren't significant risks, these are other risks, and they're generally high value items, or those which are, generate a high volume of sample testing, or in the case of infrastructure assets, we're waiting for information to come through and to tie those areas off. So I wasn't going to go into those in any more detail, as I think we've covered off the infrastructure point as well, and operating expenditure. That testing is complete, and there's nothing to raise there. If I could take you now through to page 17, this is just to highlight the work around going concern, and in particular practice note 10 regarding going concern. We as auditors, we refer to practice note 10, in particular that if the council ceased to exist, its services would continue in another organisation, and that's the provision of continuation of service approach. It ultimately means that we have no issues to raise in relation to management's use of the going concern basis of accounting. So I'm not going to go into that into any more detail. Practice note 10 can be read at leisure. It's a good read, but there are no issues to raise as part of this reporting. If I could take you through to highlight independence and ethics, there are two areas which we need to raise here, just to continue that we don't have any independence issues to raise. We continue to be independent, and our other work, which is included on page 20, that is consistent with work we've continued to carry out for the council in previous years, which is primarily the housing benefits certification, teachers' pension return, and our pooling of housing capital receipts. If I could just move on to the appendices now, which start from page 22. I'm not going to go into these in a lot of detail, because I appreciate that a lot of the IT points will be covered off as part of the next update, and that was discussed earlier in the meeting as well. There are two actions we've highlighted as part of the 21-22 audit, and these are on page 22. One relates to the gross internal area piece, in that this piece of work has been done, but we can't see that there were any formal terms of engagement in terms of this work. So we've just raised a management recommendation around that to move forward, and relating to the close down process and moving forward into 22-23 is to get that wider contact with some other departments within the council, which will help to smooth out maybe some of those areas of understanding from an audit perspective, and that we're talking to central finance about that, and having a round table event with some key contacts in other departments as well. So I'll move through the other areas as they are the IT points which have been brought forward from prior years, and that is also Appendix B, which is the follow-up on prior year recommendations as well. Our final page, the final appendix I want to take you through is, penultimate, Appendix C, which just details that proposed adjustment for the pension fund, which is the 8.7 million. That is to be confirmed, obviously, upon receipt of the final version of accounts. We'll check that through and would expect that to be changed. And there are some presentation adjustments as well, which are detailed on page 30. Our fees are set out in Appendix D. This sets out the fees for the audit for 21-22. In perspective of the final fee, obviously, if there are any variations, we will discuss those with management and agree those. I'm going to stop talking now, and happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you very much, Mary. That was a very comprehensive report and a very comprehensive review of your report. Any questions? Simon?
Yeah, it's about the objections that we've received, or you've received, as to the draft accounts. I think we had two objections for the accounts ending what is it, 2021 accounts, and now we've got another 2 objections. I've never known what those objections actually were, and are they? And the second part is, are they the same? If I've got that right.
For clarity, if I could just add, they are the same objections, so they are the continuing objections from 2021. So they're not new, but they are, as at this date, we have 2 open objections. So it's not, appreciate that's not clear within the report, but they are from the original objections. So
and are we allowed to know what they are?
Well, we need to be careful about client confidentiality or confidentiality of objectives. But I mean, the broader areas are, one is in relation to highways and value for money around what the council is doing in relation to some highways works. Another one is in a more specific in relation to I suppose planning matters or issues around, and so. I think when we've concluded our work, we will bring a more detailed report back to the council to explain where our findings are. But as we're saying at the moment, on both of them, they are progressing. I say one is close to provisional views, but we need to share those provisional views both with the objector and the council at the same time for comments. And on the second one, the reason that's slightly behind is, in line with good practice, the council was seeking to resolve the matter directly with the objector. Some progress was made, but there are still some items that the objector feels that the council hasn't properly addressed. So we're just reviewing those to see what we have to do next, if anything, around that going forward. So there will normally be, what I would bring is some form of covering report which goes through the general issues, where we landed, and our conclusions. So in terms of how fast we can get to that, whether I can get to that in January, I don't know, because there's normally, in terms of provisional views, there's statutory periods to follow through, and there's normally about 28 days to respond, etc. So that might be getting quite tight to the next if there is a January audit committee. But maybe we hopefully get one resolved by February or something like that in terms of reporting to yourselves.
Thank you, Grant. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
James wants to add to that.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. I think it's just for the assurance of the audit committee that they are technically objections to the accounts. That's the process by which they the areas that are being picked up are much more about processes that have been involved within service areas. It's not saying that there are numbers in the accounts that are being stated or declared incorrectly. So it's not an objection to the accounts in that sense, but obviously everything has a financial implication or could have, and therefore it falls within the remit of that objection.
Yeah, particularly what you've just said, that it's not a financial issue per se. I hope these objections don't end up with a delay in the accounts being published.
Yeah, I believe they wouldn't, would they? Right?
Yeah, I can't make a sort of firm commitment, but I mean, in terms of that, both of the items aren't necessarily material in terms of what, as James was alluding to, in terms of material numbers in the financial statements. So it's very unlikely that they would contribute to a delay in issuing the opinion. If there is a delay, it'll be delay into certifying the audit closed, which is a more technical difference, but it should not, at this moment, from what I've understood, they shouldn't impact upon our ability to issue an opinion on the financial statements.
Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Right, shall we? Oh, sorry, Roger. I'm looking for your hand and didn't see it.
Sorry. It was, I think in the introduction, it was said that they are no longer material, and that is on page 4, the bottom there, about departments where we and the finance team are struggling. From what was said, I presume they have now been sorted. And also on page 8, again, there is a reference there at the bottom of that page about no progress in relation. Have they now all been resolved?
I'll probably start off with the engagement with other departments. I think probably just to put that into context, we've had conversations both, with yourselves. Audit is becoming more complex, and preparation of your accounts is becoming a lot more complex. And I think what we're seeing, and it's not just yourselves, I was having a very similar conversation with a council on Tuesday evening around engagement with other areas of the council. a lot of that we've talked a lot in the past around property, plant and equipment. So, we've got very good relationships now with your estates and highways people because we're asking questions of those. But there's other areas where maybe our audit will go where we haven't gone regularly. And I think a lot of what we're seeing there is, well, I don't know if you count myself and Mary as being scary or not, but it is trying and help people understand the audit process. We're conscious that a lot of people we're now dealing with maybe not have dealt with auditors, and certainly through the pandemic. So I think a lot of that sort of engagement with other departments is probably just helping them to understand the audit process better, and that's what Mary was saying around what we're looking to do is run maybe either a workshop or some time just to engage with those individuals or those departments going forward, just to explain what the audit process is. Because normally once we've spoken to them, and Mary has done this at the coalface, so to speak, is they understand what we're looking for, and it's normally not as big a problem. I mean, I think people just get concerned around having any of their work reviewed, and it's exactly the same for me if the FRC come and review one of my audit files. So I think we recognise that people. So we're just working through that process, I think, with the council. But I think you'll probably see this as a growing area that as audit becomes more complex, it has to go more outside the finance department in terms of the questions we have to raise. And I think it's part of just how we work that through with the council and those departments around that going forward. So that's where that sort of comes in. I don't know if that's a fair comment on where we are at the moment. So.
Yeah, I hadn't got anything to add in that point, but obviously central finance are a finite number of people sometimes, and obviously certain cases to act as the middleman may not be. If we just get out to departments, we're not scary.
No,
I don't think.
We're not knocking at the knees here either.
And sorry, in terms of the second question, was it our page 8 you were referring to? Sorry, is that the same? So it's a slightly different question there. Sorry.
Yes, Chairman. Your page 8, at the bottom 3 lines of it, identified that there had been no progress in relation to the leavers process because it's a public paper anyway.
I'm happy to
start.
Go ahead. If you're, as part of the work around journals, there are a number of factors we consider, and that's, for example, people who leave the organisation, have they been removed from the finance systems in appropriate timescales, starters. For example, there are numerous areas we look at, and this links in with the IT, the work our IT team did and reviewed recommendations which are in Appendix B, and because we couldn't see progress in that area, we have to develop and carry out further audit procedures. So because that's flagged as a risk, we have to carry out more work on that lever process. So hopefully moving forward, with those IT points being addressed, we will be able to test that and remove that as a risk area. So that does link in with the IT points.
Thank you. Okay, members, shall we accept the external auditor's report with thanks? All agreed? Thank you. Right, now before we move on to the deferred item 7, I'm going to have a 5-minute adjournment. Adjournment starts.
I know, I've had to take can't really open the doors. some members of the public one.
We are now live. So,
Well, because you have to leave, it gives me an additional reason to take item 14 next, the date and time of next meeting. Arising out of my preliminary consideration of item 7, the payroll control improvements, I would like to see another report on this. You'll understand this when we discuss it. But it was my view that the February meeting was too soon to ask them for another report, bearing in mind that Christmas intervenes and so on. So I had suggested to James and to Barry that we might consider having the February meeting in March. But now there is discussion of a January meeting. So do we in fact have a January meeting and a March meeting and no February meeting? Can we fit a meeting in March, James? As far as
my understanding is that we could. It would be post council. That's the only issue.
But there's nothing specific.
We didn't find anything in particular that was a concern. Is that correct?
Yeah, there were, when we looked through the work plan, there was nothing in there that needed to go earlier in February. If that makes sense.
Okay. So the answer is yes, we can have a March meeting, which would give time for a considered report on the payroll, plus other matters which would have gone to February, which is not actually a big committee in terms of our work plan. So now we come back. So, yes, Rosemary.
thank you, Chair. Just the suggestion of the January meeting was for a single agenda item. Councillor Evans has suggested we add something else, and I was going to suggest something about payroll as well, adding that to January. But if it is a single item meeting, then it shouldn't interfere with the normal structure of the audit committee.
Thank you for that. I was going to, therefore, having heard that we were thinking of a January meeting, going to suggest that we have those reports from the dog warden and the other reports we mentioned earlier on in January, because those shouldn't demand a great deal of preparation.
The Much Wenlock and Purchase Ledger.
Yes,
Dog wardens,
the dog warden, that we add those to a January meeting to relieve a March meeting of those. Plus, what was the single item we were going to have in January?
So, Chair, the single agenda item for January was around the accounts. So it was the fact that if Grant Thornton is able to complete their work based on the statutory instrument being released, then we would be able to consider and finalise those accounts at that point. I don't know whether Grant wants to comment on that timescale from his point of view.
Could you could you manage a meeting in mid-January with the accounts? Will they be ready?
That's a good question, Chair. I think we need to see the final wording of the SI, and I think actually the key for us would be, to a certain extent, how much work we could get done between now and Christmas. I mean, Mary did point out that the SI should be out next Wednesday. Whilst it doesn't come into force until Christmas Day, we will then know, though, what the SI says. So I think the question is, how quickly can the council work through it, and then we audit it, the implications of the SI? If I'm being sort of brutally honest, I would probably say mid-January might be a little bit of a push, only in a sense of timelines for getting in. If it's mid-January, then actually writing reports for committee would normally have to be a week, 10 days before then. I know you're very good at taking reports late, if you know what I mean. So that will be my only concern around that. Effectively push it back to the sort of early January, and then that comes back to the point that was made earlier by, I think, in terms of the Christmas week. So if it could be more towards, I suppose, the tail end of January. I mean, I'm looking at Mary now as well. That would probably fit in better for getting reports and giving members time to consider them. So that would be my.
I'm looking at Thursday, the 26th of January as a target date.
If I'm, I know if I was going to if I threw myself onto members, because could you make it Friday the 27th? Only because I know that we have an event on the 26th of January when I know that the whole audit team will not be available. That was the only thing I would say, possibly. But if it has to be the 26th, then we can make it. We can make that work. So,
would members find Friday satisfactory? Right, James?
Friday's fine for me. We'd need to make sure that we've got a room available that the committee
Right.
services can.
So we've got a target date then for a meeting on the 27th of January to consider.
Chair.
Yeah.
thank you, Chair.
What's the date in February? If you're going to the 26th of January, what's the?
Well, we're moving on to March. We're not having a February meeting.
Why not?
Yeah. The existing date is the 14th of February, if that's what you're asking.
You suggested a move to March, but you've not put that to us yet.
Well, no, I haven't. I quite agree. I was hoping you would concur for the reasons I mentioned. You will see that when we discuss the payroll, there are quite a considerable amount of concerns arising from that. And I want to see another report from payroll, but I think to have it in February, bearing in mind Christmas intervenes, is not giving them a fair and sufficient time to look at the issues that will arise. And that's why I had suggested going to March.
Thank you. Yeah, I disagree, I'm afraid. I think that in September we asked payroll to come back in at the end of the year. We've now got a report that says that they can't achieve that by the end of the year. My wish would be to ask for an update in January and then an update in February. And I think we can't just keep on pushing it forward. As we go to March, we will then be looking at 6 months since the report when we ask for urgent action.
Well, there wouldn't really be very much point in having a meeting on the 27th of January and another one a fortnight later, would there? We're going for February.
The idea is to have a supplementary meeting just to deal with the accounts and some extra items, but then to go back onto schedule, I would personally prefer. But I think the schedule is worked out in relation to full council. I think we just, we'll end up being at a different point through the rest of the year, won't we? The risk that we may not discuss things ahead of full council.
Can I concur with that, Chairman?
Okay.
There is a diary there. The one in January is slotted in for this reason, and maybe put another couple of items on it just to ease what is down on the agenda for February. But let's keep the February date, because then it has a knock-on effect throughout the year.
Well, I'm in the hands of members, and
Is there a March date as well? Does that?
No. Not yet.
Okay, I mean, the thought of
It was going to supersede the February date.
it was,
because
okay,
I felt
so it's not in there, right?
I felt it would give better opportunity for a more comprehensive report on payroll. But I hear what members say, so we will try and have a meeting. On January the 27th to consider the accounts. And Grant will then make a note in his mind that if he can't get them ready for the 27th, he's got a fallback date of February the 14th. We're giving him a psychological let out here. So it's obviously the feeling of members that we should adhere to the February meeting and have a provisional supplementary meeting on Friday the 27th, at which we consider any items that are available then, plus the accounts. Okay, so we're not changing the date, but we are resolving to put in our diaries a provisional date of January the 27th for an additional meeting. Everybody going to agree with that? Okay, thanks very much. Right, now we come to the item 6, the consideration of the payroll. I think at this stage, because of what I have heard from James about certain confidential matters, I'm going to move the exclusion of press and public Resolved that in accordance with the provision of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act, this public and press be excluded during consideration of the following items, which include item number 7. Can I have a seconder for that? All in favour? Thank you.
We can just wait then. But
Yeah. Do we have any idea where they are?